Hello, my name is Dr. Ridwan Fontaine. I teach Islamic management at the International Islamic University Malaysia, and today I want to continue our conversation about the third ayat of Surah Al Fatihah. Before we start, I want to check our niyat, and this is about improving ourselves, not about judging others. And so the ayat is Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem. And this is actually a very difficult ayat to translate because often in English, Ar-Rahman is translated as the most gracious, the most merciful, the most beneficent. And these actually is very bad translation. So I will take the translation of Numan Ali Khan, who highlights the fact that the word Rahma comes from the Arabic root Rahim, which is the womb of a mother, and that has to do with love and care. So Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem is about loving and caring. Allah is loving and caring to His creation. Now, in this world, the Rahmah of Allah is about all the benefits that we get, whether it is our health, our wealth, the friends around us, etc., etc., etc. In the Akhirah, this is to do with, Rahmah has to do with the fact that our deeds gets multiplied. And in one hadith, we know that nobody can enter paradise unless they get the rahmah of Allah. So the question now is, how do you get the rahmah of Allah? And there's a number of hadith that relate to this. Generally, there is always the same structure. So the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever does not show rahmah on the people will not be shown rahmah by Ar-Rahman. Right, that's one of the famous versions of this hadith. There's another hadith which I'm going to read to you where the Prophet ﷺ said, anyone who does not show rahmah will not be shown rahmah. Anyone who does not forgive will not be forgiven. Anyone who does not pardon will not be pardoned or be protected. So in other words, for you to get the rahmah of Allah, very clearly you have to have rahmah on other people. I had a lot of things to say about this, but I will kind of change my discussion a little bit, and I want to share with you a reflection from one of my students. So recently I had about 160 students who passed their exam, and I gave them a bonus question, and I asked them, watch the videos that I put on YouTube and tell me which video do you like the best and why. So I got a lot of answers. And one of the students, a girl, kind of wrote a long essay, and she was actually reflecting on the ayat Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem. So I'm going to summarize her letter here. So she basically comes from a low-income family. She says that her father earns about 2,000 ringgit a month. Her mother is a full-time housewife. There's 5 of them, and so money is very, very tight. And so she was very conscious about the fact that her parents were making a lot of sacrifices for her. And at the same time, she was very conscious that a lot of her friends were having higher, or their families had a higher income, so they had more money, and they didn't seem to have the sacrifices that her parents were having. In her letter, she uses a number of words which I want to highlight. Okay, so I printed a copy of her letter, not her letter, her essay basically. She says, I hated that all my scholarship applications were rejected. I hated that I could not study well and my studies were not good. I was jealous and envious of my friends who were coming from stable families. Everything that happened made me angry at the situation. I had to see both my parents struggling for my sake. This affected my studies, and I was miserable at that time. Okay, so hatred, jealousy, envy, frustration, feeling miserable, simply because the fact that she was focusing on what she didn't have, rather than appreciating what she did have. Now, alhamdulillah, her mother talked to her and basically said, look, yes, we are struggling financially, but you know, we're a happy family and everything is fine, so like, stop thinking negatively. And somehow in this girl's mind, she linked this discussion to Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem. And she realized that as a person, she could be grateful for what Allah has given them, her and her family, or she should be ungrateful and just feel miserable and frustrated and so on and so forth. Now, there's other things that she said in the letter which I don't want to share, but the point that I want to make with this letter is, what is the benefit of reflecting on the Quran, right? And this is a question that some of my students sometimes, they say, look, we're management students, why are we doing this assignment? It doesn't relate to our studies. The point is that she was feeling so frustrated and so miserable simply because of her internal state of mind. It had nothing to do with the working conditions, nothing to do with her salary, nothing to do with anything external. It's just simply your internal state of mind. And she was able to flip that around from very negative thoughts to much more positive thoughts simply by reflecting on Ar-Rahman Ar-Raheem. Not even the whole surah, but just this one ayat completely changes her mind. Now, this brings me to a question that I often highlight, which is, what is the difference between Islamic studies and Islamic management? Islamic studies, it's more about the theory of the Quran and the Sunnah. What do these scholars explain? Islamic management for me is more about the reality of everyday life. So it's very important for my students to realize that if you have very negative thoughts, you can flip those negative thoughts around simply by reflecting on Surah Al Fatihah. And every time you recite Surah Al Fatihah, you're basically reaffirming the fact that you want to be a grateful person. It doesn't affect simply your state of mind, it also affects the way you deal with other people. So obviously, if you have a feeling of gratitude, you will be dealing with other people in a grateful manner, and then it will also reflect what's going to happen on the Day of Judgment, because, as I've said before, your entry in paradise depends on whether you deal with people with rahmah. Okay? So I think that's a lot of things to think about for today. Next week we'll talk about Maliki Yawmiddin. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.